Hello. This is John Huey with the Sober Atheist podcast, and I'm here with my co-host Michael Tingley.
Hello.
And we're here today. This is the first of a two-part episode today. So this is episode 23, and I'm just going to read a little blurb that we put up on our Facebook page. For any of you that don't know it, we do have a Facebook page, which you just have to type our name in on Facebook and it should pop right up and you can follow us there. Or there's a direct link to it at the bottom of the Buzzsprout feed, as well as on the YouTube page. But this is a brief description of what we're going to try to do here in these two episodes. And it's called A Question of Love and Hate, Dealing with Strong Emotions as an Atheist in Recovery. And part one, which is this part, will focus on love as a prime mover in people's lives. And part two will be dealing with the potentially explosive results when emotions loosely grouped under the term hate come into play. Some can pray about these things, but we can't and won't, and need to chart a more rational course. And we ask you to wish us luck as we embark on this somewhat difficult to encompass topic, two gigantic terms we're playing around with here. But this is the episode one of this two-part episode, and we're going to talk about love today, which has a lot of different implications, that word, for a lot of different people. And, maybe a way to sort of launch this a little bit is, people misconstrue what love is. People make mistakes about what love is. People get themselves into all kinds of difficulties about what love is. And when love goes bad, people with, alcohol and drug issues sometimes drink a lot of alcohol or take a lot of drugs behind some of what they're feeling regarding this term. And, got a couple of notes here. And one of them is, as atheists and recovering people, how do we deal with disappointment in our personal lives as we strive to find meaning and strength in our relations with others? Your love in your life isn't always returned. And particularly when you're young, you make mistakes with that, right, Michael? You kind of make...
Yeah,
I think everybody
sure
makes mistakes with that.
There's a learning curve. There's a learning curve with regards to
There's a learning curve.
Certainly.
But for people that are of our persuasion when it comes to alcohol and or drugs, sometimes we take those errors in judgment and those setbacks, particularly when we're young, and some of those things, I think, can fuel our drinking or use, right? It's sort of a loaded...
Yeah, I think humans in general tend to turn to drugs and alcohol for relief with any of those issues, certainly.
Yeah. And for us, though, I think it's a little bit... teenage angst is teenage angst, Failed college love or failed young person's love is failed, and there's a lot of stories these days about how young people particularly are feeling difficulty in connecting and forming relationships and then going off in inappropriate directions. But for us, when we get that rocket fuel in our system, things happen, all right? And, I got another note here is, how do alcoholics and addicts behave when they're faced with disappointment and rejection. Alcohol and drugs tend to magnify emotions. Do you agree with that assumption?
Certainly. Yeah.
And, when emotions get magnified, the errors in judgment that we make can become even more profound for us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're under the influence, our thinking can be defective to an extent. And these are cycles that continue and repeat over time as long as you're using and drinking, I think.
Yeah. So then in recovery and in sobriety, how do those of us who have been addicted, how do we deal with those things? If we're not turning to drugs and alcohol, what are we turning to?
Well, for many people in conventional programs, they use the term God's will, right? They use the phrase turning it over. They tend to say to a lot of people that come to them that some emotions are too strong for us. We can't handle them. We have to avoid them. We have to turn over our anxieties and disappointments
Yeah. Give
to
it
a
to God.
higher power.
Give it to God.
Yeah, give it to God. Give it up, give it up. It's God's will. Give it up to God. And we can't do that. We can't. That's not something we can do.
Well, do you think that works for those people who do that? Do you think that they're just in denial about the troubles they're facing and the emotions they're facing?
For some of them, hiding out from themselves in that way is what they really feel they need to do.
Yeah.
They hide out from themselves. And, they think that through hiding out for themselves, they'll achieve some higher purpose and open themselves up to what God's will might be for them in the future, right? Which will take them, wherever this mythical, non-existent thing takes people. It just doesn't make any fucking sense at all to someone like myself and to you as well, I assume. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And, how do we deal with it? We try as best we can to rationally consolidate our emotions in a way that makes sense to our sobriety. And it's very difficult, and for many of us, it's a very difficult and it's a very long road. Now, I do know people, and I have friends who are atheists in sobriety, I have one friend who has just celebrated his 55th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And has had a happy, productive personal life with this person for all those years, which is, I think, pretty remarkable and unusual. And I guess in that case, the alcoholism didn't affect that relationship because it started way back when and continues now long into a productive sobriety. So there's that part. Some people are just lucky with this. They get it right the first time in that part of their life, at least, even though their drinking and drug use may be causing issues. That part of their life somehow gets consolidated and rationalized and acted upon.
Now, is that
In my
someone who's a believer or a non-believer?
non-belief, I do
Non-believer.
know such non-believers. Okay, I know believers that both in drinking and years and not have, for example, been devout Roman Catholics, and they say it was their Holy Roman Church and their faith that saved their relationships and brought things together,
Mhm.
right? With us, I think and with a lot of people, it's a difficult, halting progress. I mean, I made a terrible mistake in my drinking years as a young man, getting married to a very wonderful person who turned out to be absolutely the wrong person
Mhm.
for me. And I won't go into all the tragic circumstances of that first marriage, but that first marriage for me was, I was told it was going to be an utter and complete disaster by people that were observing from outside. But me and my, brilliant bar drinking, you know, fevered alcoholic brain thought I could fix the situation and get everything, you know, hunky dory. And just because somebody was smart and beautiful, they really couldn't be that crazy. How could somebody that smart and that beautiful be that basically insane? And
Now,
other
this is
people,
a decision you made in sobriety,
well, my drinking years,
in your
while
drinking years.
my young drinking years, I thought I could fix someone with mental illness because they were brilliant and they were gorgeous. Okay. And I was out of my fucking mind. I just made no sense whatsoever of that situation. And only in the end probably made it worse for her and certainly for myself. It was a mess. And I was told it was going to be a mess. At the wedding, my mother came up to me, my late mother, who was so smart, so wise. She came up to me and she said, it's okay. You don't have to do this. You can stop this right now. I wish you would.
Yeah,
And looked me in the eye and she said, don't marry that girl. Okay. I mean, that was pretty direct, right?
really. Yeah.
And I said, well, uh, I'm going to marry that girl. And I did, you know. I mean, we had a beautiful reception in the old Ritz-Carlton Hotel. How it got paid for, I don't even remember. I think somebody came up with the money, but a beautiful reception. And we all got completely whacked in the suite in the hotel. My college friends and all my DC drinking buddies went out and set up this incredible bar in the room. And I recall the bride passed out in the bathtub. That was one of the. It was not an auspicious
No,
occasion.
no.
All right.
Yeah.
And, that I can look back on and say that was directly connected to my drinking. All right.
Yep.
Not so with my second wedding. All right. Which took place, it was about 4 years or so after my sobriety date. That was placed around 1991.
4 years into sobriety, you got married again.
I did. And, she's another, she's still very much alive. She was another, very smart, very gorgeous, very, in her own way, wonderful person, sweet person. You could look at her childhood photos and tell what a sweet person she was, and maybe still is. We haven't communicated in many years. But last time we communicated was in front of a adjudicator. Well, we won't go into that. I've had many trips.
So now that was a mistake that you made in sobriety.
Absolutely. And I
Okay.
thought, and my career was progressing, my career was taking off. And I thought that part of my sober life should have a long-term relationship in it. I had a couple of very interesting short-term relationships. Uh, but I made a very serious mistake. I married someone in that program who wasn't serious about her own sobriety.
Hmm.
And her thing was pills, not alcohol was never her thing. Her thing was pills. And I made I made an error in judgment that uh, the fact that it appeared she had some recovery from this pill habit, that uh, things would be well and good with two sober people marching, what do they call it? Marching the road of happy destiny or something like that, or
Yeah.
traveling the road of, yeah. And, again, smart, beautiful, very talented person with, published books at a very young age and all kinds of other stuff that in the Washington world I live in look good. And, I was living pretty good in those days and did live pretty good for a long time. And I could finance just about anything we needed to do, wanted to do. And she had a career and things were okay. But the big mistake that I made was not really figuring out that some people don't recover.
Hmm.
And knowingly and willingly being married to such a person and really wanting kids and knowingly and willingly having two beautiful, gorgeous, exquisitely smart and wonderful people that we brought into the world. That was another part of it. And I won't go into all of the details, but as my career progressed and my life changed and my travel, most particularly my travel schedule, got to be really sort of amazing where I was going. I was under the impression that if I could afford to pay for a, you know, laundry person to help with the laundry, someone to clean the place up, and someone to take care of the kids, that all would be well. And I could, and I did pay for all of that. All right. My overhead was so stressful. It was this gigantic overhead, and we lived in this gigantic apartment at on Connecticut Avenue, an old pile of bricks called the Broadmoor, which is, I believe, going to have its 100th anniversary next year. Wonderful place, great place, and over leveraged over everything, and when I just it just didn't make any fucking sense at all, and I did that in sobriety. So how do we account for those sorts of mistakes? Uh, was I fully rational when I made all those decisions?
Or how was it? How did you deal with it once you got to that
Oh,
point?
well,
How did you deal with it as opposed
I
to
dealt with
drinking and
it.
drugging?
No, I didn't drink and drug. I just, I had fun out on the road. All right. We won't go into all those details, but, I'm no angel, right? Uh, I had a lot of opportunity in a lot of countries, a lot of different places around the world to do pretty much whatever I wanted to do, and I was doing that. And I was also working 70, 80 hours a week. And the good news was that I knew that this person loved her children. That I didn't think there was any direct harm that was going to come to them. But the whole environment of, sometimes off the stuff, sometimes on the stuff, I just basically compartmentalized and denied it. I made a mistake. And well, the good news is brought two wonderful people into the world who are basically okay taking care of themselves, having productive and good lives today. So there's no tragedy there even though I'm sure there's still a lot of residual things that came out of that. But rational atheists can make mistakes too, right? And we pay dearly for those mistakes, but we don't drink and we don't drug as
And hopefully we learn
result.
something from those mistakes too.
And hope I mean, there's another point we had here. And, did we find love and happiness before our recovery? Like that friend of mine I'm referring to that's had this wonderful 55-year marriage that's done them both. They're both great people and they have a great life. Or was it delayed, as it often is, until sometime after our recovery begins? And in some cases, it's delayed a considerable amount of time. Because in my long life, now I could see 76, I guess I've lived a fairly long life so far. I was 19 years sober and 57 years old before I found the correct person to be with in my life. I didn't find that when I was 27, like I thought I did the first time. I found it when I was 57. My second marriage was basically over, except for the legal part. And I had somehow figured out how to pay for this highly leveraged lifestyle that I had. And I was starting a business living in a foreign country and met the wonderful woman who I've been with. We are going to New York City, not New York City, we're going to New York City we got to go to the Frick for an opening. In January, we're going to Spain, we're going to Madrid, and we're going to have our 20th anniversary of being together in Madrid.
Excellent.
In January, in the chilly weather of Madrid. I've never been in the Prado. I got to go to that place. Other place. We're going to Madrid. Now, Barcelona's overrun these days. Going to Madrid. And I'll tell you, Michael, it's a secular miracle that I finally figured it out, right? And the only word I can describe is rationally working out at long last in my own mind what the word partnership means.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is incredibly gorgeous, as you know. She's a world-class beauty and just incredibly brilliant and has done extraordinarily well here in this country since we pulled up stakes and started living back here, except for me going back and forth to Russia in 2009. And I never, ever would have had even a remote possibility of being with this person unless we were partners. She's gorgeous, she's brilliant, we're lovers, all that other stuff. But the key to it was being able to partner somebody and keep your head through thick and thin.
There you go.
Through good times and bad times, through healthy times. I've woken up in hospitals thinking that was it, and there she is, and she still stands with me and stands by me all the way through some really sort of horrific medical shit she's had to go through particularly these last 10 years. So fortunately, all is well now. Actually, we're talking to each other. That's another second minute. I'm out here. But finding love in your life and forging a genuine partnership can be a long and arduous process. but you have no shot at it whatsoever while you're drinking. And in my case, I had no shot at it whatsoever until I figured out how to grow up and forge a real partnership,
Mhm.
which I'm very sorry and sad to admit I was 57 years old before I began to figure that out. And 19 years sober. I mean, shit.
Well, what I've learned from being sober, almost 20 years now, is that all of the love that I thought I had found while I was using was relatively short lived, primarily because of my lifestyle as an addict, addicted to alcohol for a long time, addicted to other drugs for a long time, was self-centered and selfish based. So there was no way of establishing any sound long-term relationship while I was using. Now, it's taken me quite a while to learn how to be less selfish in sobriety because of those habits that I was used to while I was drinking and drugging. They didn't go away overnight when I stopped using and drugging. I owe that awareness to my sobriety, the fact that I've got a strong relationship now because I am not self-centered and self-focused on my addictions. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's the big difference in my life. I mean, just that lack of selfishness, being more aware, more concerned about the other person. That the idea of partnership, like you say, that's not a partnership isn't possible when you're living a selfish life and when you're focused on yourself and only you. So yeah, I mean, I think all of that is clear now. You were talking about some of these issues in a way to examine the difference between an atheist and a believer under these circumstances. Which, from my perspective, I think it's all lumped together as a human condition. The things that we drank and drugged over, and that most people do, whether they're addicts or alcoholics or not, they're still turning to those things, turning to God, turning to alcohol and drugs to deal with those emotions, to deal with love and hate and everything in between. I think it's important to recognize that there is a difference between how us as atheists deal with these things, these issues, in sobriety and out of sobriety, whether we have something else to depend on or not.
Well,
And I think being sober, one of the things that I've learned in sobriety is not only that the need to be less selfish, but also to be self-reliant and recognize my own strength and my own will, and what it is that keeps me going inside as opposed to outside.
right, precisely. We're in the you used one of the key words in all of this, which is selfishness.
Yeah.
And in my current marriage, which has been, as I've said, extraordinarily happy, hasn't been without a rough patch or two along the way. We had a lot of stuff to deal with in life. But I'd say the worst thing that ever happened to us in our relationship, my current relationship, is me failing to deal with certain aspects of my own selfishness,
Mm-hmm.
egotism, being driven in a certain way for certain things to the exclusion of the desires of your partner. And that can end a relationship.
There you go.
And I was very fortunate that I saw the nature and the consequences of that behavior and did something about it.
Yeah.
And have done something about it for some years now, right? I'm just continue to be cognizant of what my partner needs.
There you go. Yeah.
It's not just what I need.
Mm-hmm.
We joke about what I need. She's having these ups and downs with all this government stuff and not knowing where the future is going to take us financially. And I need a new Sony 55-inch Master Series television, all right? But it's very expensive and it costs about a month's rent for that
Wow.
thing, okay? It's not one of those Costco specials. It's something you order. It's not cheap. And, that's the only selfish need of mine we've had a dispute about in the last year is my desire for my new Sony Master Series 55-inch TV, because I watch too much CNN, and I've got an image retention problem on the current perfectly good TV. All right? That's a joke, okay, because we laugh about that. I say, oh, gosh, good.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my TV now, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the serious shit we figured out
Mm-hmm.
and dealt with,
Yeah.
right? In a rational kind of way. Now, I know people in that other nameless, forsaken wasteland of a program that I was in for a while, which I will not name.
That works for some people.
It does, because
Yeah.
I absolutely know people that
Yeah.
are in awful relationships and are treated badly,
Mm-hmm.
that stay in them because they pray about it. And they get an answer when they pray that keeps them as stable at home within the confines of what would consider to be hell. All right.
Yeah.
But they seem to, I know some instances. I know other instances where people of faith have built their entire relationships around their church and their faith and their way of life that's connected to all of those things. And they appear to be living, happy, normal lives. I got no problem with that. It's just that kind of stuff is just inconceivable to me,
Mm-hmm.
that I would pick up my Bible and go be a deacon somewhere, and that would keep me on the straight and narrow. Only thing keeping this old man on the straight and narrow is figuring shit out. We don't have any choice. We either figure it out and work with it within the context of our life, or we don't. And if we don't, we pay the price, like I did in marriage number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Paid a big price. Won't go. I'm still paying it. It's some stuff just doesn't get better, and the consequences of what you've done in the past tend to follow you. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, when you deal with problems proactively, you end up in productive relations and partnerships and interactions, and just having the ease of mind when somebody comes home from work and you've been occupied doing your thing the whole day, and there's the stresses and strains of daily life that build up in these contexts. And when you get together, you say, oh, both people say, I'm so glad to be home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, I want to go out and act out with somebody else, for example, which is how some people deal with unhappiness at home. I don't have any of those impulses or desires as it relates to my current relationship. None. And I can say that's the first time in my life. I'm not, because when you can rely on somebody else and they can rely on you, then a relationship builds, strongly. Both parties have to be able to rely on the other. And if one of them is a drunk or one of them is a serial philanderer with girlfriends and spending money that way, or boyfriends and cheating that when none of that stuff is present and people are being honest with one another about who and what they are, then a relationship grows. And it grows stronger over time, not weaker. Like so many relationships are there because of social pressure, or financial pressure, or familial pressure, or habit, whatever. No, we're together because we want to be together. That's a good feeling. I don't have any of those concerns in my life now.
Well, do you think there's any difference between that and what a believer goes through? I mean,
The net effect, but the reason how they get there is totally different. Okay?
yeah.
They go to some guy in a fucking church somewhere and get counseling to pray about their disagreements with each other together. All right? Or they go to a confessional booth in some place with a guy in that Roman place.
Yeah, and
Where
how is
they
that
go and
really any different from going to see a psychiatrist or a counselor of some
well,
sort?
I
You
didn't
know?
I didn't need a psychiatrist. I just needed
Well,
to look at my situation and look at the consequences of what I did right and wrong. Now, you can go see I mean, you go see a psychiatrist for psychiatric problems, in my mind, or emotional problems, which really don't have. They're emotional problems that are inherent to you. Some people have medical conditions. Some people have other things going on with them where they required some outside help, often now these days using medication for emotional disturbance. I'm not talking
yeah, but
about
also for relationship issues too.
they do that. People do that, and people seem to benefit from that, and non-believers certainly do that. I haven't felt it necessary to do that. The one time I tried that in my second marriage when it was failing, it was a complete and utter disaster for me. I just didn't believe any of the shit I was being told and didn't do it. All right. I mean, I'm that way.
Mm.
Somebody tells me what to do. I tend I can take umbrage with people trying to muck around in my personal life. But I didn't find this partnership deal until I figured out what I was doing wrong myself and stopped doing it.
Mm.
It was just that simple. It's sort of like that day I figured out when I was about a year and a half sober, when I figured out that Lucky Strikes were bad for me. I had this craving for 2 packs a day of LSMFT non-filtered
Yeah.
old style American poison, and I was between wife number 1 and wife number 2, had come out of the girlfriend's house and I think left my cigarettes at her place, which was way over in Cleveland Park, and I wasn't near a store, so I was rummaging around in the car thinking I had an extra pack somewhere in the car. And I reached over, I was near my office, I pulled over in a parking spot and reached over into the glove compartment to rummage around in the glove compartment from the driver's position, and suddenly had this terrible pain in my chest that wasn't a heart attack. And I started coughing and wheezing and all this other shit. I was 30, I guess 39 at the time, a little young to be wheezing. And I just made the mental connection finally made the mental connection between my fucking Lucky Strikes and the pain in my chest. And I stopped. And I've never had a cigarette since
Mm.
because I went through withdrawal for a week or so, or two. I don't know what it was. I went through some sort of unpleasant nicotine withdrawal. I haven't had a cigarette since. I can make some of this stuff is akin to some of that. You can be beating your head up against the wall for years and rationally sort of knowing what's wrong, but not doing anything about it until you analyze it line by line and do something. It's a rational approach to recovery from yourself. I'm talking about. Now, that won't work for some people. I'm not saying it works for everybody. I'm not saying it works for a majority of people. I just know that's what worked for me, was finally coming to terms with some of my own shit, right? Which is the only reason we're going to have a wonderful meal in Madrid in January, if all goes well. Right?
So you say you learn to deal with your own shit. What exactly do you mean by that?
That means,
how did you deal with it? What do you mean you learned to
deal with it by recognizing and eliminating or lessening the effects of your own selfishness. Looking at and dealing with and recognizing the limits imposed on a relationship due to your own impulsive behavior. Okay? And most of all, learning the paramount importance of absolute honesty to the best of your ability in a relationship that you want to keep.
Yeah.
And then even more with somebody that doesn't listen like me, finally, at long last, in a listening to what the other person says they need instead of just what you need. Right?
Yeah.
That was my shit, because I had problems in all those areas.
Yeah.
And I had to somehow deal with those problems and prove to her that I had dealt with them. Because believe me, there's a long line of people, even to this day, that would love to be married to her. All right? Okay? A long line.
Yeah.
In a number of places around the world. Okay? So she wouldn't be lonely for more than a few minutes. She wanted to get rid of me. So that's the facts. You have to figure out in sobriety how to deal with the various aspects of your life, personality, habits, actions, and desires that negatively impact on your ability to have a sustainable long-term relationship. That I figured out.
Yeah.
Without any God, without any praying, without any, tears of contrition or any of that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just figured out what was good for us, what was good for her. Right? She contends that she can't live without me. I don't know why. I'm not asking any questions. I know I can't live without her. I mean, what I find incredible is when she says she can't live without me, which I tend to believe, right?
Yeah.
Because something went right here at long last. Because in sobriety, it took me a long, long time to figure out some of this shit that I needed to deal with about myself. I wish that other people at younger ages would figure it out first. I'm not suggesting that doing it my way is a good way to do it.
Well, yeah, I can identify, and I think I've been in a much similar situation as you. But I've also had a lot of help from counselors and, in particular, social workers and a couple of psychologists and group therapy along the way. As well as just talking about it with other people that are in a similar situation. I mean, however way you get there, it's that same conclusion. The idea that
Right.
caring about somebody else instead of just yourself is the bottom line, and being honest about it. Honesty, I mean, those are big things that we learn by being sober.
Yeah, I don't mean to denigrate anybody or any, the therapeutic community. I don't mean to
Yeah,
denigrate that process if it's a process that works for you. I just found out through trial and error that I just wouldn't work for me.
yeah, yeah.
I had to learn the hard way. I'm a hard head. All right. Other people are open to suggestions that may provide them with an easier, more uh, uh, expeditious path to finding out some of this stuff than some of the shit that I did. But, we're coming to it like there's a bullet point here I did want to get to, and it's basically this: in meeting our expectations of personal relationships, how did we come to a realistic appraisal of what was possible and an acceptance of what wasn't without resorting to supernatural belief? In other words, how did we grow up without some sky daddy, right? How did we do that?
Well, I think that Sky Daddy is a little bit of a hindrance, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think we're without that, we get to that place we're trying to get to. We don't need to fall back on that belief, because we especially, I mean, the scientific method, man, trial and error, figuring it out, examination and experimentation, all those ways that we get to that rational conclusion of what we need to do, where we need to be, what path we need to be taking. Yeah, that's all. I think, like you said, I think it's expedited because we don't have that supernatural belief holding us back.
Well, at least that was my observation about my own. I never would have figured it out if I was relying on someone or something else other than, kind of getting old enough or getting mature enough to understand what's possible in the other person and accepting that.
Yeah,
And in turn, seeing that the other person uh, understands what's possible with you and accepts that. And then you can forge a path together with a certain amount of harmony
yeah,
without this awful burden that rises up in relationships, which, brings me to the last bullet point on this little
yeah.
page we got here. And, did we get to a point in life when we were free of resentment and jealousy in our home life? How did we achieve that without a belief in God? Getting to a point where resentment and jealousy, if they're not totally absent, we are human after all, are brought under not a modicum of control, but when it comes to your closest personal relationships, you'd better control those things
Yeah.
somehow.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't control
Yeah.
resentment and jealousy, you're in the deepest of deep shit.
Well, and it comes back down to the honesty and the attempt to be less selfish. I mean, and even just accepting those things, that there's going to be some resentments, there's going to be some jealousy, but
Yeah.
recognizing it and confronting it and uh, learning to accept it. I think that has a lot to do with that, and that has a lot to do with honesty.
Yeah. Well, in my case, I had to make a joke out of it because I say, well, Gully, as soon as you go out the door and I'm not with you, I could be jealous 24/7. Okay. Easily.
Yeah,
I can start panic, I can have this whole, because of her situation in life, I should say. She's had a sort of a special situation in her life that she's had, has an exact, she's amazing. But, you just have to begin to understand. You have to be mature about it. You have to say, I trust this person. This person trusts me. And that not only is enough, it's a gigantic relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a relief to have trust in your life. What a relief to be substantially free of whatever resentments might arise in the course of daily life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I went broke once and had to make a living back again once, and we went through a lot of stuff with the ups and downs of my overseas business, patents, and other issues business things I was dealing with. And, we have a really nice place to live in, but the kitchen's too small, right? And I laugh with her all the time when we work together in the kitchen, and like just last night, we were working together in the kitchen, whipping up something, and we wanted to do it fairly quick because we had to go out and do some other stuff. And she said, it's so much better when we work together.
Hmm.
It's so much easier when we work together.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I just sort of laugh and look at her, and and we don't kill each other because this kitchen is too fucking small. Okay. That's even more remarkable. Okay. Little things like that, when they're easy, life is just so much better. All this teenage angst and stupid fucking things that go through people's minds about their partners and not acting on any of that. Being able to sort of laugh at that. So, yeah, I'm a little impatient because I can't get to the microwave right now. That's like, that's great. All right. And, it's nothing is ever perfect, but we do achieve a certain amount. I think, Michael, a certain amount of atheist equanimity because we've learned how to balance things without these exterior forces pulling our fucking chain.
Yeah. Or creating a sense of denial. I mean, and lack of responsibility. I think
or in the case of some of those religious fucks, instilling guilt over
yeah, yeah,
instilling this sense of, anxiety and guilt about not having obeyed some fucking rule that was written 3,000, just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And, this is, we're coming, I think we're coming to a good sort of consensus on this one, on
Sure.
this part.
Yeah.
And I know you have a good and great and stable relationship, and so do I. And for some people listening to this, they might say, well, what do these guys know about? Well, I know a lot about hard times. I know a lot about not having a good relationship. I know a lot about making fucked up mistakes, even in sobriety. And, we just kind of got over it.
Well, I've had more failed relationships than successful relationships, partially because I refuse to accept responsibility for those failures and refuse to accept responsibility for the successes. I think it's now that I'm accepting my responsibility in these situations and in my life in general. I'm responsible. And I think that's important for me. I think that's part of the reason that I've been successful this time in my relationships, because I accept responsibility.
And we learn something that was really vital for me, learning how to listen, really listen at long last.
Sure.
To my partner.
Yeah.
And what she needs and what she wants and what she truly desires in life. I began to figure that out.
Yeah.
So that's brought us to a really good, I think, sort of point where we're in. I think we have some consensus on this all of a sudden,
There you
right?
go. Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, there's consensus. But next time, the next episode, this is episode 23. Episode 24 is going to be about hate. I use that word, I don't use that word lightly. And I don't know if it's going to be too loaded for the Sober Atheist podcast or not. I think we're going to find out how loaded that
Well,
word.
yeah, the truth is you can't have one without the other. So, it makes sense to at least spend a little time to balance it out.
Right. And we're going to try not to get overly political in the next episode, but inevitably some of our current feelings and situations about the state of our
Yeah, there are some hate triggers there, aren't there?
life as a country. Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But we'll figure that out. We'll see how this episode goes once it posts.
Yeah.
And look for, some way to deal with the second part of this. I wanted it to be a kind of a thing where we had a duality going here.
Yeah.
And, I think this episode's been overwhelmingly positive in its result. We'll see what the next episode has to bring for us down the road,
Sure.
because we're in a era, we're in a state, we're in a part of history where history is rolling over a lot of people.
Yes, it
And
is.
there's a lot of hate out there in the world that is rolling over people. I'm thinking, like now this morning, I'm thinking of the people of the state of California. There's a lot of hatred being directed at our whole most prosperous, most important state in the union. There's hatred being directed at the whole place.
Yeah.
I can't get that shit together at
It's a
all.
challenge for us all to
Right,
hold on
right,
to at least a little bit of hope. I mean, it can look hopeless very easily.
right. And that's what you've always helped us center on and try to do here in this effort of
Yeah.
ours to be of some assistance to a small subgroup of the people that are in the recovery world.
Yeah.
We have no illusions about being a big boy in the recovery, or big boys in the recovery
Right.
world.
Right.
But at least we're trying to be of some assistance by deploying that word, which is what I think we had a kind of a hopeful tone about relationships in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah. There's hope. There's definitely hope.
Despite some of our personal failings.
You know.
So we'll see what we can do, and we'll move forward. And it seems very quaint for us because the world is so fucked at the moment. It seems sort of quaint of us to end with the peace and love thing, but I think it's something we're going to continue to do despite its
Yeah.
quaintness.
I mean, it helps me with that
It
sense of
helps.
hope
It
to
helps
think that
me, and it helps
there
me
might be
to
some peace and
remember
love left on this
my
planet.
younger days
Yeah.
when we would well, God, I'm got the fist is coming up now. That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
next
There's that balance.
fist may come up on the next episode, but right now
Yeah.
we're going to talk about peace and love and wish everybody
Yep.
a fond adieu. And we hope this episode made some sense. Thank you.
Peace and love.
Bye now. Peace and love.